Por que a maioria dos investidores perde dinheiro, enquanto muito poucos constroem fortunas de milhões ou até bilhões? Hoje você vai ouvir uma verdadeira aula de Howard Marks, um dos investidores mais respeitados do planeta e uma das poucas vozes que até Warren Buffett faz questão de escutar. Howard é cofundador da Oaktree Capital, uma das maiores gestoras do mundo em crédito e dívida estressada. Ele construiu a sua carreira enxergando oportunidade onde a maioria só via pânico, durante grandes crises como a de 2008 e a de 2020. Mas não espere respostas fáceis. Nesse episódio, o Howard vai desafiar muito do que você pensa que sabe sobre risco, volatilidade, previsões de mercado e tomada de decisão. Vai explicar por que o investidor que acha que sabe o que vem pela frente é muitas vezes quem mais se machuca. E como pensar diferente da maioria pode ser a sua maior vantagem. As ideias que você vai ouvir aqui são desconfortáveis, contraintuitivas, mas transformadoras. Se você está cansado dos clichês do mercado e quer entender como os grandes realmente pensam, fica com a gente até o fim. As lições de hoje podem mudar a sua forma de investir e talvez até a sua forma de tomar decisões na vida. Seja muito bem-vindo ao episódio número 4 do podcast Second Level, com um investidor que inspirou o próprio nome desse programa e a quem eu sou profundamente grato. Vamos nessa. Mas deixa eu fazer uma provocação aqui antes. Sua gestora cresceu. Os ativos aumentaram e você decidiu profissionalizar a operação. Contrata um COO, investe mais de R$1 milhão entre salário, FIIs de recrutamento, sistemas e depois de um ano, nada mudou de verdade. Sem processos escaláveis, sem clareza, sem resultado. O COO não falhou sozinho. O que falhou foi o desenho da sua operação. A maioria dos gestores ainda trata áreas como risco, compliance, RI ou operações como algo que alguém vai resolver. Mas você não gera o seu fundo no achismo ou na esperança, certo? Então por que a sua empresa segue no improviso, na base de remendos? Na Outliers Advisory, ajudamos a redesenhar a sua estrutura, atrair talentos certos e garantir que a sua gestora seja tão boa empresarialmente quanto você é na gestão de fundos. Fale com a gente. Seu COO agradece, seu RI agradece e o seu investidor também. Nossos contatos estão na descrição desse vídeo. Howard, it's a truly honor to have you here. Our entire podcast was inspired by your concept of second-level thinking, and your memos have helped to shape countless investors, including myself, thinking about the market. Thank you for joining us. Let's start with the moment we are living through. The last memo you published has a title many of us have come to know well. Nobody knows. Just like in 2008 and 2020, we have entered a new phase of radical uncertainty, but this time triggered by policy rather than financial excess or health crisis. What makes this moment feel different, and what does it remind you of?
Well, it is somewhat reminiscent of those two crises because both of those were what I would call external events. They were not related to the inner workings of the market. Many of the bubbles I've lived through occurred just because people got too excited, stocks went up too much, and then they had to go down because they were too high. This was different. This was exogenous factors. As you
like
say,
the pandemics.
Yes, as you say, the pandemic in 2020 and the global financial crisis in 2008, which was primarily about things that had taken place outside the investment arena. So this one is the third. It's around politics, global affairs, geopolitics, economics, tariffs, governments. But I guess each of the other two had the potential to really change the world, but didn't. So those are forgotten in that regard. This one, I think, has the potential to change the world again. It can, it can change the place of America in the world. It can change alliances, alignments, trade practices, standards of living, many things. So, all investing, like all business decisions, requires some degree of predictability. And I think that we have no idea where we're going to come out on the tariffs eventually, or what that means for business and the world.
And when history offers no reliable playbook or macro predictions feel futile, what mental frameworks do you on to distinguish between danger and opportunity? How does Oaktree operate at these moments?
Well, I can't say I have a lot of experience in these things. I think the global financial crisis was the closest. Um, and, you know, this far in my life, I've always made the assumption that things will return to something called normal. And of course, that assumption was very profitable in the global financial crisis. We were able to spring into action quickly, putting lots of money to work. Oaktree invested about $650 million a week on average for the last 15 weeks of 2008. That's all you had to do. And the great thing is that I'm told we were the only buyer in the world. So if you're putting a lot of money to work and everybody else is unwilling to buy, you probably get some good bargains. We assumed that the world wouldn't end, the financial sector, as many people thought it would. That was our edge. Turned out to be right. It's harder to know what to assume in this case. Because, I guess what I would say is that in the past, I've always applied logic. I'm not 100% confident that logic will obtain in this case. People should not blow up the world over tariffs, but personalities and politics enter in, not just economics. We'll certainly invest. If we find a good company with a good business, well capitalized, well run, we'll invest today. We'll invest at lower prices than we could have 2 weeks ago. We'll still be dependent on somewhat of a return to normalcy. So far, that assumption has held. If it doesn't, all bets are off. As the memo says, nobody knows.
Yes, yes. And that brings me to something I imagine happens often at Oaktree, probably on a daily basis. Let's say you're evaluating a new deal under normal conditions, no macro chaos or political chaos. What does your checklist or mental model for assessing risk of a new investment look like?
Well, first of all, my partner, Sheldon Stone, who is my longest running partner, 42 years now, since 83, in our early days together, put together a credit checklist.
Mm-hmm.
And it has 8 areas of investigation. That's a good example of the thinking we do here. How about the company? First, the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Cyclical, volatile, predictable, essential. Number 2, the company. Where does it stand in the industry? Usually, number 1 and 2 in the industry has some power and some ability to determine its own future. Company number 6, 7, and 8 are at the mercy of 1 and 2. Management, quality of management. Interest coverage, the relationship between cash flow or profit and debt service requirements. How well does it cover its debt service requirements? And down like that, mm-hmm. to eventually saying, are there alternative sources of cash if the business slows down? And what if the whole thing crashed and we had to sell it? Would we get repaid? So, just these factors. Mm-hmm. And I think we've modified it over the years, but we had never completely changed it. These are the essential things. But the most important thing, Samuel, is discipline, is doing it consistently. The investment industry is very anecdotal. So I get a report. It says, buy this company, great product. The next one says, buy this company, great management. Doesn't say anything about the product. Next one says, buy this company, very strong resources in the ground. Doesn't say anything about the product or the management. So I've always tried to get the people I worked with to be consistent in their approach, to ask the same questions of every company every time. And they complain like hell because they say I'm taking away their creativity. But I think creativity is a luxury. The essential thing is a consistent attention to detail.
Great, great. Talking about risk yet, many define risk as volatility or standard deviation, but you suggest something more profound. How do you explain the true nature of risk, especially to those trained to see it more as mere numbers? And is risk truly quantifiable, or do we just convince ourselves it is?
Well, it's funny that you should ask the question that way, because one of my favorite inspirations on the subject is a memo that was written by Peter Bernstein, who was one of the great investment philosophers, maybe the greatest ever, in my opinion, around 2009. And the title was, Can We Reduce Risk to a Number? And the punchline is, I don't believe so. And my memo, Risk Revisited Again, was actually revised again to incorporate a lot of messages from Bernstein. This business of the number is very significant. I learned about risk for the first time when I went to the University of Chicago for an MBA in 67-69. And the Chicago theory had recently been developed there around 64. It was brand new. I was among the first classes to learn it, which was a great advantage. And it was really, more than any other one thing, I think, a methodical way to contrast potential return with risk to see if the risk is well compensated, or past performance with return to see if how good a job the manager did, how much risk they took to get the returns they got. So it was a mechanical, methodical, mathematical approach. What does that mean? It means it required a number for risk. You can't do formulas and calculations involving risk if you don't have a number for risk. So they settled on volatility, or the standard deviation of price or return, for a very simple reason. There are no others. If you don't use volatility, what are you going to use? How can you assess the risk of a proposition, either one you're considering? How can you reduce that to a number? Or even the risks you took in the past. How can you quantify how much risk you took if you don't use volatility? So they accepted volatility. I assume they did it, their thought process was like I just described, but I don't think volatility is risk. What is volatility? We're not talking about the riskiness of the underlying enterprise. We're talking about the day-to-day fluctuations in the price. Is that a risk to an investor? I don't feel it is. When I buy an investment, I don't care if it goes up or down the next day, or whether in the next 100 days it goes up and down a lot or a little. I care about where we end up. Buffett always puts these things best. He said, I'd rather have a lumpy 15 than a smooth 12. And people who prefer a smooth 12 over a lumpy 15 must either be what we call nervous Nellies, or be operating in an environment where they can be criticized, or some other bad development. They must have a boss or a client or a board or something like that who's going to have an adverse reaction if things are up and down, mostly down. That's not me. I only care where we come out. And I think that the investment business is enormously preoccupied with short-term events. And I'll go through periods of time like 2015, 16, 17. I got one question every meeting. What month will the Fed start raising rates? And I used to say, why do you care? What difference does it make? If I tell you they're going to raise rates in May, what are you going to do about it? And if I call you back and say, no, not May, August, what are you going to do different? But people feel they have to ask these questions because they feel it's professional and responsible to understand what's going to happen, even if they can't have knowledge. You know, what good is it to have to spend all your time ferreting out forecasts that have no special probability of being right? Anyway, these are not the things that matter, these short-term events. And as I told my clients, as I wrote in a memo called What Really Matters, what matters is whether we invest in companies that grow and lend money to companies that pay us back. That's all that matters. And, you know, whether the Fed raises rates in March or May or August or whether the stock is up or down 2% tomorrow, it doesn't matter. So it's a matter of focus. And our focus is on fundamentals, not market behavior. I wrote a memo called On the Couch, because I think every once in a while the market needs a trip to the shrink. And I followed that up maybe the week later. People were reacting very strongly to what was going on in the market. So I wrote a memo called What Does the Market Know? I don't think the market knows that much. I don't take my instructions from the market. Because the market doesn't focus on fundamentals, I do.
Great, great. One of the hardest questions for any investor, novice or professional, is knowing when to lean in. So let me ask you, when is the right time to take more risk? How do you know?
Well, first of all, I would encourage you, Samuel, to get rid of the word no.
Okay.
You never know. You may think you know. When is it your inclination? When do you get the urge? And, you know, I and Oaktree are value investors. And value investors, I think, have what's called a contrarian streak. Contrary means the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
And we tend to do the opposite. So if everybody is depressed and panicking and fearful and pessimistic, and everybody wants to get out, that's a great time for me to buy, because their highly motivated selling has a high probability of causing the asset, whatever it is, to sell at a bargain price. I want to get bargains. On the contrary, if everybody is eager and optimistic and greedy and patient, they'll probably pay too much for investments, which I don't want to participate in. That I want to maybe sell to them or at least ignore what they're doing. So I think in trying to assess what to do in the market on a short-term basis, ignoring values, long-term outlook, but to try to get a handle on the short-term basis, I think you have to get a handle on psychology. And, you know, the economy doesn't fluctuate much, up to down 2 in a given year, not too much. Corporate profits fluctuate a little more than that, up 10, down 10. But the market fluctuates all over the place. You know, the market was up 10% on April 9th, and it was down 10% on April 1st and 2nd, or was it 2nd, 3rd? Why? Because of psychology. It's very powerful. It swings manically, and it's very volatile, but it doesn't matter in the long run. So keep your eyes on the fundamentals, understand the psyche of the people around you, And if you have the ability, which is not common, operate in the opposite direction.
Great, great. I asked when was the time to take more risk or not. How do you know? It's hard to know. And on the flip side, you argue that the riskiest time is when investors believe there is no risk.
Right. Well, that's one of my favorite sayings.
Yeah. What are the signals you watch for to detect that kind of complacency in markets?
Well, in my book, The Most Important Thing, there's a table called The Poor Man's Guide to Market Assessment. It's half serious, half joking. But are investment people popular or unpopular? Are they surrounded at cocktail parties or ignored? Do new deals sell out quickly or do they languish? If you want to go into a deal, are you given an allocation or sold all you want? These are environmental signals. I don't, as I said, half serious, half joking. But I always say, if I go to a cocktail party, does everybody want to ask me questions, or do they want to talk to the movie star or the rock star? And that tells me how popular investing is at a given point in time. And the more popular investing is, the more you have to be worried. There's an old story that J.P. Morgan turned negative on the market because his shoe shine boy started telling him what he was hearing about great stocks to buy. It may be true, it may be apocryphal, but it's significant. And literally, I think it's true that the riskiest time in the market is when people think there's no risk. Because if they think there's no risk, they'll bid them up and buy them like crazy, and things will soar to excessive prices, which are dangerous.
Right. Well, let me ask you just one more question on this first section. In your view, what kind of risk investors tend to underestimate the most in general?
Well, I think it follows. They underestimate the risk that follows from excessive popularity. They think that if everybody loves things, they must be good things, so they should buy them. And they don't say, well, if everybody loves things, then maybe they bid them up so high that they're dangerous. And the latter is actually what we call second-level thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what you've chosen for your podcast series. And I think it's a very important thing to think about. The first-level thinker says, this is a great company, we should buy the stock. The second-level thinker, a little deeper, a little more profound, a little more nuanced, says, well, it's a great company. I'm not sure it's as great as everybody thinks it is. There's a good chance the stock is too high because people think it's greater than it is. We should sell the stock. So there's a big difference between first level and second.
Great. And that's exactly where I wanted to go. Let's shift a bit from risk. And one of your most powerful ideas is the notion of great investing requires second level thinking. I think most people hear that and nod, but don't always know how to put it in practice. How does second level thinking actually help investors better identify and assess risk in their portfolios, and even if they're not market experts?
It's a long and complicated answer. But the goal in investing is to be a superior investor. That may be obvious, even you're nodding. If you want to be an average investor, it's really easy. Buy an index fund. You'll get average results. But if you want to be a superior investor, you have to have an advantage. You can't think the same as everybody else. If you think the same as everybody else, you'll probably act the same. If you act the same, you'll have the same performance. So thinking the same is not a very good recipe for superior performance. To have superior performance, you have to see something different from everybody else. Now, I want to say right up front, it's important that you can't say, so that means, according to Howard, I have to think differently about everything from everybody else. So if I say, is that what color is your suit? You say gray, and he agrees a gray, and he agrees a gray. I said, well, then obviously your suit is blue. You know, you can't hold different opinions merely for the sake of being different. But obviously, the greatest opportunities come when everybody else sees something one way, and you see it another way, and you're right. If you're wrong, you're probably going to end up in trouble. But if you're right, that's a great advantage, and you can probably capitalize on that and have a successful investment. However, Samuel, your belief that your different thinking is right has to be well-founded. What makes you think you're right? What makes you think everybody else is wrong? So it's deep. You have to be deep. And, most people don't do their own legal work, medical work, dental work. Most people don't even fix their own cars. So before people try to do active investing for themselves, that is to say, this stock, no, that stock, buy this, sell that, or market timing, get in, get out. Before they do these things, they should ask themselves challengingly, why should I believe I have what it takes to do this? Why don't you fix your own car? Oh, I don't know how. Well, do you know how to invest? Yes, I do. What makes you think that? And so, to think that everybody else says one thing and you say the other thing and right is kind of like saying everybody else is a moron, or you're the smartest person in the world, which is usually not true. So I think you have to think hard before you do these things. Most people would probably be better off buying and holding index funds than trying to be superior in terms of stock selection and market timing. But people like to try.
Yes.
Because they like the idea of getting rich.
Well, for those who try to be second-level thinkers, be it amateur or professionals, they often stand alone. And they are contrarian, as you said, and that's not always comfortable. How do you maintain conviction when the crowd disagree? And what's the difference between being contrarian and simply being wrong?
It's a complex question. Dave Swenson, who ran the endowment at Yale very successfully, the most successful endowment investor, one of the perhaps best investors of all time, from 85 to 2020, said that investment requires the adoption of uncomfortably idiosyncratic positions. Now, remember what I said about the second-level thinker. Everybody else thinks it's this, you think it's that. You're right, you make a lot of money. But if everybody else thinks this and you think that, you must in some way be uncomfortable. Anybody who can do that and not be uncomfortable probably has something wrong with them. But the thing is that because of the courage of your convictions, you are uncomfortable, but you do it anyway because you think it's the right thing. So I think discomfort is natural. And everybody else thinks that XYZ stock is the greatest stock in the world, and they're all buying it, and it's going up 10% every day and making everybody else rich. And you say, no, I think it's an illusion. I'm not going to buy it. So you don't buy it. And that should make you uncomfortable. But if it goes up 10% a day for the next 3 weeks, that should make you even more uncomfortable. But the point is, if you want to be superior, you have to do what you think is right. And the fact that nobody else agrees with you should make you question your assumptions. but it can't deter you from what you think is right. It's as simple as that. Now, where you get the courage of your convictions, I don't know. It's just a constitutional thing. Maybe your partners help you stay strong. Maybe you're very confident. Of course, you don't want to be too confident. That's hubris. That's how you get in trouble. The answers to all these questions are simple but not easy. Being a second-level thinker, it's easy to explain to you why you should be. It's not easy to be it. Living with uncomfortable positions is easy to explain why it's often the right thing to do, hard to do. And people should not confuse the two. Then you asked, what's the difference between contrarian and wrong?
Wrong.
Well, if you're a contrarian, you may be right, you may be wrong. Being wrong means it didn't work. Now, let me say two things about this that are interesting. So my first book was called The Most Important Thing. 20 chapters. Each one says the most important thing is, and then it's something else. Because in investing, there are so many things that are important. But the publishers, Columbia University, put out a second edition called the Illuminated Edition. And there are little points in the text where it's especially good, I think, on Kindle. If you tap on it, it'll give you a commentary on what you just read, written by either me or some other people. So one of my friends, Joel Greenblatt, said in there in the chapter on contrarianism, a great thing. He said, just because 5 other people refuse to stand in the path of an oncoming truck doesn't mean you should. So, as I say, it's not enough to be different. To be a contrarian or a second-level thinker, you have to say, what do I think? What's the probability it's right? What do other people think? Why do they think that? What's the probability they're right? What are they missing? What's the chance that I'm right and they're wrong, or vice versa? It's a complex analysis, but it's clearly the only way to have a shot at superior results.
Good, good. Well, let's move into our final segment and take a step back from the moment. After everything you've seen across decades, cycles, and crises, what's the most important lesson about risk you've learned as an investor?
Well, I think you have to understand the nature of risk, which is the possibility of an unpleasant outcome. You have to understand that there's nothing you can do to avoid risk. And in fact, investment consists of taking risk. You have to realize that risk and losing money are not synonymous. There's a risk that bad things will happen and you'll lose money. For the professional investor like me who has to retain clients, there's also the risk that good things will happen and you'll miss out. So you don't want to be positively positioned and lose money when bad things happen. You don't want to be so conservative that you fail to make money when good things happen. But you can't eliminate both. Because if you eliminate the chance of losing money, then you also eliminate the chance of making money. If you make sure that there can't be a gain that you failed to participate in, then you'll participate in all the losses too. So you have to be at peace with risk. And you have to understand that you have to balance. You can't avoid risks. You have to balance risks. You have to balance the risk of losing money, which nobody wants to do, with the risk of missing out on gains, which nobody wants to do. You have to take the right amount for you, you see. Nobody can tell you how to do this. If you're a conservative person, you might say, I really don't want to lose money, so I'm willing to miss out on some of the ups that other people enjoy. If you're a very aggressive person, you might say, I want to make sure I get all the ups of everybody else and more, So I'm willing to expose myself to the risk of loss. Either of those positions is intelligent. What's not intelligent is to say, I want to get all the ups, and because I'm so smart, I can do it without exposing myself to the possibility of loss. That's dangerous.
Okay. Looking back, which books or professionals have most shaped your views on risk?
I mentioned that memo from Peter Bernstein.
Mm-hmm.
Bernstein was the smartest person I ever followed. And there are different kinds of smart. He was smartest in that way. But, his thinking was brilliant. Now, having said that, let me confess. In 1971, my job at Citibank was to follow Xerox. And I would tell the people in the portfolio management department what I thought about Xerox. So somebody came to me. Each brokerage firm, what we call the sell side,
Mm-hmm.
had a Xerox analyst. So a portfolio manager came to me one time and said, who's the best sell-side analyst on Xerox? So I said, well, the one who agrees with me most is so-and-so. We always think that the people who agree with us are smart. You never have somebody where you say, oh, that guy's a genius. He disagrees with me in every regard. Can't be. But I think Bernstein was great. And his memos are probably not available anymore. I don't think there's a database. I keep trying to find it. But he wrote a book called Against the Gods,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the history of probability. And it explains probability, which is an important facet of risk or way of thinking about risk. And he points out that if we didn't have the science of probability, we could not intelligently engage in risk transfer. When you drive down the street in a car, you don't want to have the risk of an accident, so you buy an insurance policy. But the insurance company wouldn't know how much to charge you if they didn't understand the nature of probability. So probability is very important, and that's what the book's about, and I recommend it. So I think that Bernstein was very important to me. John Kenneth Galbraith exposed me to the way psychology fluctuates in a book called The Short History of Financial Euphoria, and I got a lot of that. There aren't many books on risk. I'll tell you one of the most helpful. I never stopped talking about the first book I read when I got to Wharton in 1963, 62 years ago. It was called Decision Making Under Uncertainty: How do oil and gas drillers decide where to drill and whether to drill? And I read the book and I learned a lot about risk and uncertainty and so forth. And how do you make decisions under uncertainty, which of course we all have to do. The message that I took away from that book, which was most valuable, was the realization that you can't tell the quality of a decision from the outcome. This is really brilliant, and most people don't understand what I'm talking about. They say, well, it worked, so it was probably a good decision. It didn't work, it was a bad decision. No. Good decisions fail to work all the time because quirky things happen in the environment. And bad decisions sometimes succeed because quirky things happen in the environment and people get lucky. And we all know people, we say, oh, that guy, he was lucky for the wrong reason. But what basically you're saying is he made bad decisions, but he was successful anyway because of some quirk. It's important to realize this. And if you're in a decision business like I am, where you're not right all the time, can't be, you have to live with the fact that you make mistakes, but that doesn't mean you were wrong, just something happened by surprise because of randomness that nobody could anticipate.
Great. Well, Howard, thank you again for the generosity of your time and wisdom. For those listening, whether they are managing portfolios or just trying to navigate their own savings, what one closing thought would you leave? Something they would carry with them when the world feels uncertain or when the markets get noisy?
You know, Samuel, the most important message, we talked about all these sophisticated concepts like risk and second level thinking and that kind of thing. But the most important message is very simple. Over time, economies tend to grow. At least they have so far. And over time, well-run businesses tend to expand their profits and become more valuable. So the most important thing is to get in on this process and participate in the growth of economies and companies through an intelligent investment portfolio and leave it alone. Don't get in and get out, because you might miss something. Don't say, I'm going to participate in that company, but not that company because I like that guy, the color of that guy's tie, or he gave a great speech and I thought he was smart. So, you know, in our country, we have the index funds that replicate the various stock indices. And I think that people should buy one of those or a basket of those and fund it early in their lives and stay with it and add to it as they can and let the growth process make them rich. And in other words, get on board and stay on board and don't try to be too smart. You know, people like me who want to make a living at it can try to outdo the others. It's not easy. It's not for everybody. But for the man on the street who's trying to build a retirement fund or trying to build some wealth, the best way is invest early, invest a lot, don't screw it up.
Mm-hmm. Great, great. Back in the 70s, high yield credit was unconventional. If you start in your career today, what off-the-radar asset class would you explore?
Well, I mean, everybody's investing in credit today. Everybody's investing in private credit.
It's not off the radar anymore.
No, it's not off the radar, but what is? You know, the 70s, that was a long time ago, 50 years. That was a period when ignorance existed. Today, there's no such thing as not knowing something. You go to the movies, we say, I saw a great movie 5 years ago. Who was the actor? Within 5 seconds, you can tell me. There's no such thing as not knowing something. There used to be asset classes and securities that were overlooked because people didn't have knowledge. Today, that doesn't exist. So I would change your question. I would say, what asset classes make sense as a place to work? And I think credit is a good place. But
still,
it's been good for me.
Nice.
Well, I mean, look, frankly, I spoke at a conference for wealthy people down in Miami a few years ago, and some woman said, my grandson is thinking about going into the investment business. Do you think he should? I said, my advice is he should go into the investment business in 1969 because it was good for me. That option's not on the table. The world is more efficient, more informed. It's harder to outperform these days because everybody knows everything, but it's still worth trying.
Great, great. So last one here. What one lesson you wish you had learned earlier in your career?
I was the child of people who were adults during the Great Depression. The Great Depression in the 30s was a scarring experience, and they were scarred by it, and that influenced how they treated me. So when I grew up, every day I heard, don't put all your eggs in one basket and save for a rainy day, and don't take too much risk. I probably could have done better as an investor if I had been less cautious. No, it worked out okay.
Yes.
But you should balance optimism and caution, and I was probably too cautious. Having said that, as you say, I was pioneering in unconventional fields, and if I hadn't been cautious, I might not have been able to build a business. So I can't really regret it. But at least to date, the world has been more positive than I expected it to be.
Great. Okay. Howard, thank you very much for doing this.
Well, I'm always glad to see you, Samuel, and to participate with you.